Welcome to Critter Crusades, the show about ordinary people on extraordinary missions to help animals. I'm Missy Woodward. Today we're talking about animals and social justice, a very important topic. We have a very interesting guest, Dr. Pia Salk. Welcome.
Thank you.
Pia, you are a clinical psychologist and you specialize in the human-animal bond. Tell me a little bit more what that means.
I'm obviously a psychologist for human beings. However, I integrate work with animals into all the things I do, whatever the population is. And also, I write and speak about the treatment of animals as a social justice issue. So, and what I mean by that is that in the same way that people are oppressed, or the things in our culture that lead up to that, we can look at how that impacts animals and sort of broaden our circle of compassion in a therapeutic way.
What's interesting, I meet so many people in the animal rescue world. They are dealing with the one-on-one rescuing an animal, dealing with terrible situations that happen, let's say like Katrina, and I know you were involved there, and different situations, but you're looking at the future. You're looking at children, you're looking at education, you're looking at the whole impact of society. That's something really big to grab a hold of. What drew you to that?
You know, I think with things like that, I'm not sure if you're drawn to it as much as it's just something in you, and you kind of know it intuitively. And as a kid, I remember always feeling I got it. I knew animals. I don't understand. They're equal to us. I don't quite understand, and it was always sort of tragic for me to have to see what our culture does, and then try to watch what I was being taught, which didn't seem to make sense intuitively. So I carry that with me, and then so as I've gotten into my work as a psychologist, I've started to make the connections and try to figure out how to use my field of psychology as a vehicle to help people understand the bigger picture in terms of our connection to other beings, and the importance of understanding and deconstructing the things we're just taught. We are given messages automatically. We're all a victim of that. And only can we be sort of consistent with our internal self in the world if we deconstruct them. I don't know if that makes sense, and I'm happy to expand upon that, but if that helps.
Right, and because you come from a very clinical background, I'm sure very deeply you understand this. For those of us that are lay people, we have to go, okay, what does that mean? One thing you said to me when I first met you that I thought was interesting, and it was sort of it's not a simple subject, it's simplistically said. You said it's the way people thought about slavery. They had, there was a consciousness.
Yes.
And you're in a way of shifting consciousness. The conscious shifting about slavery and the ideals about that was monumental, and it took a long time.
Yeah.
And the whole idea about animals being second-class citizens, and not just animals being second-class citizens, but the treatment, everything from fair farming, for animals, to the pets in your neighborhood, to whatever. I mean, it's a huge topic, but you're taking it on and doing it in a lot of different ways. I'm going to go in and look at some of the things you've done in your life, but let me go back to the very beginning. Were you in an animal household?
I always had cats growing up. I grew up in New York City, and my father didn't believe that we should have a dog if we didn't have a yard, so we typically didn't have dogs. Sometimes we fostered them here and there, but I always had a cat.
Oh, okay. So you had a love of animals, and your family was very much supportive of that.
Oh, of course.
And actually, your little friend here, your baby Pickles, is one of the ones currently that you're fortunate enough to have in your life. So you have worked a lot with children. You've worked in a lot of different programs. It looks like. Start with when you began your work in clinical psychology. What was the first thing you sort of took a hold of that you said, this is an animal-related issue that I can do something about? What were some of the first things?
Well, I think, and you make a really good point. I think really what you're talking about is I'm wanting to see a paradigm shift in the way we think. And I'm not asking that we think of one thing as worth more or less than another, but that we actually see things on a circular continuum as opposed to worth, more or less. And that's, I think, where we get into trouble as a culture. But in terms of what led to this, my specialty track in psychology was diversity. And I sat through many classes that were about, different ethnicities, different religions, and how to be empathic and helpful as a psychologist to different people. And what I started to watch was that people would become more politically correct, but it didn't seem that people were really getting what we were talking about. And I had always been trying to make that connection, like, how am I going to help animals with psychology? And then I was like, aha, oh my God, what it is everything we're talking about is a misuse of power. Mm-hmm. Everybody who's marginalized, oppressed, everybody who is not given protection from suffering, stripped of their rights, whether it's because of gender, species, race, whatever it is, it's because it's a misuse of power. Mm-hmm. And that to me just was like, aha, there it is, because that is what animals fall prey to. And they are not protected by the law. And so to me, it's identical to civil rights, to the women's movement, to all other movements like that. Now, what's so interesting to me, though, is that even people who are very aware in those arenas have a sort of reactiveness to that, which is, well, wait, are you saying that animals are worth more than people, or that people, what about the people? And suddenly we're into this discussion of who's worth more, whose life is worth more.
I've always heard people say, okay, if I was drowning in a dog, who would you say first?
Exactly. So, and I started to realize, like, whoa, why is that even on the table as a conversation? I mean, compassion breeds compassion. I mean, the animal movement sprung out of the child protective movement. Mm-hmm. I mean, and that's a whole other story. Mm-hmm. But really, if you strip things away, it does not have to be an either-or conversation, and nor should it be. In fact, it is destructive to the very nature of connectedness, and anybody who goes against oppression, for one, needs to go against it across the board, because it is about a misuse of power, and to cut it up and say this is worth more, and their rights are more important, or the animals of Katrina are less important than the people of Katrina, that is the exact same machine that is social injustice working in this day and age, but we don't see it that way.
Well, I know one thing, I'm from Texas, and so it's a very big cattle state, and people say, well, you have to eat certain animals, and so it's misconstruing the difference between animals that you eat and animals that are your pets.
Right.
And there's been a big crossover throughout the years of people taking in their goats into their home as their pets, or whatever kind of animal it is. And also it's just the fairness in those types of industries too.
Right.
You know, there's a shift, a paradigm shift, I think, really happening there.
Right.
And you brought up Katrina. Now, you were very involved in Katrina. Tell me about what happened there for you.
Well, I originally went down as a volunteer because I couldn't bear to see it on TV and see these animals that were being left behind and people who were being forced to leave their animals, and it was really unbearable. And I went down as a volunteer, and then got very involved because as the rescue effort was sort of publicly coming to a close, it wasn't even close to being done. So I co-founded one of the rescue groups that continued the mission to save the animals with 2 other people, and we continued the rescue.
What did you see as far as the justice or injustice towards animals and people? Was there a correlation, and did the people really want there to be more justice for the animals?
Well, it's a great question, because I came back and I would say, you know, it's so interesting because really what was done culturally and by our country to the people of New Orleans was done to the animals and is done daily to the animals. So essentially what I'm saying is those people were sort of treated as surplus, like if they're quiet, maybe it'll just go away. This problem of Katrina will just go away. And that's the same as it was with the animals. They're surplus. Let's just let a little time pass, and we don't need to rescue them. So it's very much the same. And in that way, it was a similar issue of marginalizing and people and who's worth. And you know, a lot of people would say, well, had that happened in this part of the country, we wouldn't have seen that. And I saw a lot of very interesting issues in terms of that.
And also, laws have been passed now to allow people to take their animals.
Yes.
This was truly a life-changing event for the betterment for animals and for people, because I saw people saying, the only thing that matters to me are my animals
Yes.
now, because that's the only thing. The houses can go away, the family heirlooms, everything can go away, but a living, breathing, sentient being is still there.
Right.
And that's all that matters to me, because I don't have children or anything, you know, or I do have children. They are part of my family.
Right.
You know, and that was a very interesting thing. And that has led you into, I believe, getting involved in other activities that you've been involved with. I know also that you are a spokesperson for a website, 1-800-SAVE-A-PET.
Yes.
And so what do you do, and how do you help them to speak about how important it is for adoption, and how does it relate to social justice, if at all?
Well, there are a number of different things there. 1-800-SAVE-A-PET is North America's largest online way to adopt pets, and I'm very pro-adoption. I'm of the belief that we have power in our choices, and if you can save a life, that is what should be done. And I think there is so much value, obvious value, but then there's also so many different layers of the value of adopting a pet. When a family decides to adopt a pet, and I say companion animal, but they have a tremendous opportunity there to teach their children about social justice, about who we are in the world as a family. We're a family that actually, thinks about our choices and gives back. We're a family that doesn't take the party line. We don't believe the myths. There's a lot of myths about shelter pets and why they end up there. Or perhaps we're a family that, why don't we adopt an older animal? Why don't we adopt a pit bull? Why don't we adopt? So there's all sorts of opportunities there for a conversation about what we don't judge, we don't generalize. We are willing to go the extra mile and take a stand. I mean, there's all sorts of really fruitful values you can teach your children by being pro-social in that way. So that's another thing I often speak about, and I really believe that people should adopt.
And where did Pickles come from?
Pickles came from a very small pound in rural Georgia.
Oh, great, great.
Yeah, and another thing I'm working on right now is I'm consulting for the city to help with some outreach programs, and we're really talking about contextualizing the notion of animals and, keeping our animals and adopting animals in a way that is about being humane as a city, that it's all connected, that anybody can do something to help animals in our city, and that it's all connected to all the other issues of social justice.
And what about, I know another area that is so major is that you've been involved in. I know that you're a very big proponent of anti-vivisection, and the social justice behind the protection of animals that don't have to be used to test and to do things, that there's other ways to find answers, and being in a medical field yourself. I mean, talk about that.
Well, my feeling is, again, and it's about deconstructing the messages we've been taught. People have sort of lay answers to things. We have reflexive answers. Well, you have to. Well, if we didn't do this, then we would do this. We all have them. We've all been taught them. But if you peel away one or two layers, people don't really know why. And it's the same for vivisection. What may have been needed at one point in time is not a justification for using it now. And that's, and it's different with all different kinds of research and so on, so I'm not getting into the specifics of that. However, there's a mythology around it, and it's accepted as a norm. So because it's accepted, and there's a belief system built around that to justify it, that really just no longer would suit what is needed, people need to understand that there are alternatives that are not being used. And the other piece of that is that, and I know the reason you asked that, is, my uncle invented the polio vaccine, and he was able to do that because his approach was creative. And he did not go with the standards of the time in terms of how he did his research. So what I'm saying is creative thinking and problem solving, and not relying on old norms just because everyone says that that's the way it was done, so if it was done that way, then you need to do it that way, is progress. And so now we have the opportunity to be more humane, and to not take it is actually very unscientific and bad science.
Well, and that's, I think, the whole idea of what you're doing now with a psychology degree. You're taking it to a different level. You're using a creative process in your mind to say, how do you connect what I do now to help another area of life, maybe it's always been used for humans, for children, for different issues. Now you're using it towards animals and the connection between animals and humans.
Right.
It was creative thinking that brought that about. Now, you're also involved in other areas. I know you're helping create a Humane LA. Tell me about your work with the LA Task Force and what you're doing to really do a change and shift of consciousness here in Los Angeles.
I've been asked to consult with the Department of Animal Services to help them create a program that engenders or invites people to adopt animals and be more humane. And what I brought to that was, let's not just talk about it from the perspective of being kind to animals. Let's talk about this about a greater kindness, a humane LA. My LA is a humane LA. What that will mean ultimately with the projects we're talking about is, I'm a landlord in LA who allows animals. I'm a store that provides safe haven for battered women who are leaving and need some place to bring their animals. I'm a school that's raising money to help with an abused animal case, with an evidence animal. That there's things everyone can do, but that it's about a greater humanity, about being a humane LA on every front. I mean, we have a Million Trees program that is very successfully, and what that is we're planting many trees in the city. That's a very successful program, and that has widened the circle of compassion to include the earth. So I'm simply talking about widening the layers, because if we don't do that, if we don't widen the circles, we're just perpetrating the same crime, which is arbitrary lines of worth. Oh, well, it stops here, and people. Oh, okay, well, animals. Oh, the earth. You know, it used to be it stops here, you know, Caucasians. Oh, well, okay, let's include African Americans. Oh, well, then let's include women. So it's the same conversation, and until we have an inclusive approach that does not talk about worth in an up-down way, but a yes and, until the conversation, when I come back from Katrina, is not, well, you were helping the animals, well, what about the people? Until I'm not having that reaction from everyone, you know, then we need to really forge ahead and have a greater understanding of how compassion breeds compassion.
How do people react when you talk about these subjects? Are they very interested? Are they very open to the idea? I mean, obviously, if the city of Los Angeles is talking to you about it, it's a conversation that they want to have, and obviously others want to have. But do you run up against a lot of brick walls and people go, huh, what are you talking about?
It varies, and it probably varies a little on my approach. I mean, I'm a human being in the world. You know, there are times that, and I live and learn, you know, and honestly, I believe, and I think this is one of the more valuable things that I understand about this, perhaps as a psychologist, but probably just as a person who's gone through a process of consciousness raising myself, is that it is a process. So oftentimes people will say to me, well, Pia, what do you people do about that? What do you people wear that? Do you eat this? What do you people? And my response is always like, whoa, 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 you people, do you want to know what Pia does? Because what Pia does is, and then I explain, because I'm not perfect. I mean, in some ways I think to get to a place where you can feel good about change or you can grapple. It's a very painful topic. It's a very painful thing to think, oh my God, there's all this suffering that I've been contributing to. I don't want to. People don't want to contribute, but they don't know there are alternatives, and they don't know that they don't have to do it all at once. So, okay, adopt an animal today instead of buying one. You know, make one meal not an animal. You know, so I feel like I try to offer people a way that is not so all or nothing that it's unbearable, and it really is a process, and you've got to go through that process. But go through it. It's such an enlivening process. It is so liberating, and so I feel connected in a way that feels so consistent with my values too, and that is mental health. You know.
Right. Well, I know for myself. And everybody's got a different group of people they're around, and I've always, like I said, I'm from Texas. Meat eaters, very open. They love animals, but animals are a certain class, possibly. And I just happen to be vegetarian. I would never, ever speak to anybody about vegetarianism dealing with animals, about cruelty to animals. I never. I talk about health. I say it's about good health. I feel so good. I feel alive when I eat live vegetables, live things. And it's funny. It interests people more when you come from a place that might not, it's just more palatable for them. You have to know your limitations and when you can talk to people a certain way, or they'll think, oh, you're a bleeding heart, crazy person, you know. And I never want to be that way. And I find that approach has worked well with many of the people I've had on the show in the way they talk to people, because they have to deal with the world. You're dealing with the world. If you're going to go teach in a school, I mean, I know you also are involved very much with children and different programs.
Right.
How do you go into a school or into an organization and, you know, you've got parents of all different types, teachers of all different types. How do you go in and talk to them and say, this is a way we should start approaching this? Are most people open to it, or do you have a different way you approach people to include animals, to include social justice?
Well, you know, again, I'm human, so it's always evolving, and it really does depend. You know what I mean? I wouldn't say I set out to change people's minds, you know, and what I do clinically versus what I do in the world. I mean, I think just by being who I am in the world and honoring animals the way I do and being consistent the best of my ability, we're all inconsistent, and having to grapple with that is something that I've done. Is an important thing. So just by being who you are, I think, is one way of being, and answering people's questions. I don't go at people. I also think that because the message is so painful, it's very painful when you start to deconstruct and think, well, wait, that's going on? I mean, this recent video about factory farming, I mean, many of us know that goes on in most factory farms. So it's not a surprise to us, but it's very painful. So immediately what's natural to do is to want to dismiss the messenger. Because I don't want to deal with that message. Oh, please, I want to see that as just a crazy person, a crazy video, or whatever. So I notice that the more you give people reason to dismiss you as a crazy animal person, the less, you know, headway you're going to make if you really do want to instill some change. Now, again, I don't want to put anything on somebody who doesn't want it. You know, I probably have the same response you do to people there are people who really want to go at me. And it's an interesting defensive reaction. Like, what did I do except not order meat? Or what did I do except adopt an animal?
Exactly.
And that tells me a lot about how they're struggling to get consistent on something that is not feeling consistent.
Right. And I do find, though, that people always bring it up to me. I never say anything.
Yeah.
They're like, oh, did you see that video on the news last night about what they're doing to animals? Yes, I did. Oh, do you mind if I eat this? I say, why would I care what you eat?
I always say, apologize to the animal, don't apologize to me.
Right, it's very funny.
Right.
So you've done so many fascinating things, and I mean, you're an amazing person. You've got such great energy in what you do and what you've accomplished. What is your mission now? Where are you going from here?
Well, my mission is, you know, in broad strokes, is to help make that connection for people about social justice, the connection between all forms of oppression, all forms of, you know, when we strip people of rights, species of rights, the earth, so on and so forth, and what I can do to support people to make changes as they do that. I want to do now. You know, professionally, I consult on programs and things. I try to help integrate animals that need help, so that it's mutually beneficial. So say you have abused children and you have abused animals. So it has to be mutually beneficial. Otherwise, we're just sort of using the animals again. I think so. I talk a lot about doing that with elderly homes or children, or really any population. It would be fine. It would be helpful because it's about connection and about an understanding that is not verbal. I mean, I'm a psychologist. I can talk till I'm blue, right? But there's a connectedness and an understanding of shared experience that happens with animals, especially with children who have been taught not to trust humans. That is invaluable, and I want to facilitate that for them, and the elderly and other populations, because that you just can't create that.
What is your wish for animals now?
What is my wish for animals? Oh, wow. Well, I mean, I wish that all the suffering would end and that they would get the rights that they deserve, and so on. I guess, but for me, it has to be on a personal level. I wish and strive to leave the world a better place for animals than how it was when I came into it.
Right. There's so many things that people can do and to get empowered, and they might not be able to go to school like you have done and be able to understand such big concepts. What would be some general things in these last moments that you think are action steps that people that watch this can go out and do and make a difference in the realm that we're talking about in social justice? What would be a few of those ideas and concepts? that they could take out to the world, to the people they know?
Well, everyone can do something. So with every choice that you make, start today, consider its impact on animals. With every choice you make. You know, you see a billboard that advertises something, start to open up your awareness a little with your choices. Oh, I was thinking of adopting a puppy. Think about that. You know, so certainly adopt an animal. Perhaps think of adopting older animals, things like that. But just, I think, start to just massage that consciousness in a way that is, because we're all a product of the same thing. These are not bad people. That's why I feel bad. Like, people shouldn't be attacked for this. We're all, so it's a worldview that is wrought with problems. So start to think, why do I believe that? Why do I believe animals are worth less? Who made that rule?
So that's part of what you're talking about, deconstructing. You can analyze yourself and say, where did that thought first come in my head that I could have meat as opposed to a vegetable? Or where did that thought come into my head that I had to buy a dog versus adopt a dog? Or
and is it true? Is it true what I've been taught? Or why is it okay to take the rights of animals away? Why is it okay to cause suffering in the name of science? Why is it okay? What makes it okay? And then, you know, as you strip that away, there's a lot of things that you'll find that really don't support it. But just start to think, ask the questions. That's really all.
Asking the questions, that's very important. Thank you so much. This has been very thought-provoking, and it does make you think. There's a big concept out there of social justice for animals, and we're all a part of it.
Yep.
Everybody can take action, very simple steps every day.
Absolutely.
And it starts with their own consciousness. Thank you for all that you do. Thank you, Pickles, for joining us and being such a good little soul.
She's a good little girl.
Thank you for joining us here on Critter Crusades, a show about ordinary people on extraordinary missions. Go out and make a difference. Remember, don't litter, spay and neuter. Check us next time. Thanks.